Any community news? Anything going on in New Madison?
Got a new fireworks committee formed.
Oh, they did. They
Yeah.
got the volunteers came in?
Yeah, trying to get something lined up for this year.
I heard they weren't gonna have it.
Huh?
I heard they weren't gonna have it.
That's the original committee was saying we're gonna have anything, a bunch of hell was raised, and got a new committee formed. They're trying to get somebody, they're looking at possibility of the 2nd of January for fireworks, or 2nd of July. Hollinsburg Legion's having fireworks on the 3rd for the 250th, so there's several others around, but they're looking for a group to set them off.
Huh. Was it the amount of money that they would have to spend, or?
Well, the original committee had the group that set them off last year was going to be charged like $50,000 to set them off this year.
Jeez.
And they got a $28,000 budget for fireworks. So they, last year was their last of a 4-year contract for that group. So this year there's a lot of demand for the 250 and everything.
Right.
So prices are sky high. They're working on it.
Isn't that something? Even $28,000. Of course, New Madison's is pretty impressive. The fireworks displays have always
we've had a
been.
good fireworks show for quite a number of years.
Yep. That's a lot of money for a little town like this. I mean, and that's what the city council meetings or county council or church board, anytime people start to voice their opinions, it gets interesting really quick.
I was asking a friend of mine from Grass out there. Police chief down there went into Cincinnati and posing as a vice officer or whatever.
Does anybody have any idea what was going on?
I don't know. I think Grass is going to have a special council meeting today to discuss.
They're gonna have to.
situation. You know,
But I mean, did somebody call her and tell her, or did it just pop
I
up?
don't know. I mean, this lady she was fired from the Dayton police force. I don't know.
Yep.
I don't know what she's trying to do.
Ah, yes, small town life. And what people don't realize, I don't know if any of you have ever lived in a big town, but big towns are just a conglomeration of small towns. Because I've lived in a couple, and I hate living in big cities, but every little neighborhood is just like another little city where, most people know who their neighbors are. They may not know them by name, but they know them when they see them. And they know what they do and what they don't do, and they know who neglects their kids and whose dogs are out when they shouldn't be out, and they'll tell you all about that. So, all right, welcome to First Universalist of New Madison on this really nice spring day. They were talking about frost last night, but I don't think we got any. They're talking about frost. Come on in, have a seat. They're talking about frost tonight. So to be safe, I'm going to go ahead and cover my stuff. I just took everything out, all the plants I kept in all winter long, and basically watered them and moved them into the windows so they get some sunlight, so at least they lived. So I would really hate to set them out and then have them all killed by frost. So, do we have any announcements? All right, we'll have our prelude, April in Paris. Perfect. April in Paris. It's kind of like April and May in Washington, D.C. with the cherry blossoms. But any time in Paris is a good time. All right, our chalice lighting for our ancestors, for our children, for ourselves. Each Sunday, we light the chalice of our religious heritage. We do this for our ancestors who taught us through their various religious traditions and by their actions for justice and hope. We do this for our children who are learning the traditions we teach and who learn more from our actions than our words. We do this for ourselves so that we are inspired to remember our beginnings, reflect on who we are now, and spread our wings as we understand who we seek to become. Most of you probably know from the picture of Auschwitz, we are talking about fascism, Zionism, and the Lucifer effect. We'll kind of go into those and do a little more explanation as we go along into the morning. Our opening hymn is 21, For the Beauty of the Earth. Is a prayer for these times by Kenneth P. Langer. Let me find peace within so that I may be calm throughout. Let me find silence within so that I might find compassion throughout. Let me be reminded that some things are worth waiting for. Let me be reminded that the journey is more important than reaching the destination. Let me see the non-doing is as much a part of life as the doing. Let me be reminded that it is in these moments of holding on that I can find quietude and renewal. It is within these times of inaction that I can find rest. It is in these times of emptiness that I can become full. A couple of our slides are on the topic that we talked about. we're talking about Zionism and fascism, or what's going on in Israel compared to what went on in Germany. This cartoon, I think, pretty much displays it. The ovens of Auschwitz versus the street scenes of Gaza, where every single building is destroyed for miles on end. There is a certain symbolism there. And this cartoon depicts kind of the Lucifer effect, and we will talk about the Lucifer effect, and I'll give you an explanation for that. It was a college experiment, which is pretty scary, but actually pretty indicative of what is happening. All right, joys and concerns. We always light a candle for our missing members, whether they are missing by movement, missing by illness, or missing by inability to attend. Whichever, our hopes and dreams and thoughts are with them. I don't have any information on anybody in particular, so if anybody, I have not had any updates during the week, so if anybody has any, or if they would like to let us know, we would appreciate it.
Let's light a candle in celebration of spring.
Yes.
In terms of lilacs, redbud, dogwood now, whiteburnum, and all those other wonderful pink trees that bloom everywhere right now. Let's be thankful for that after the winter we had.
And the spring flowers came. We had some puny ones out here, and I didn't pick them last week to bring in, and they're gone this week. And all of mine at home are gone. So sometimes we'll do a discussion of the difference between artificial flowers, how they are always present, but they don't really have the life that a real flower has. There's some kind of a sermon in there somewhere, so we'll dig that out eventually. So we light a candle for spring for everyone. Don't know of any illnesses in the community, anybody who's gone. So we have a candle for Ukraine. We always have our sunflowers. No progress. Ukraine has been pushed pretty much to the back of the burner because of all the information going on between Israel and Lebanon. The disasters there continue. There was a peace declared, and the Israelis are still bombing and still destroying. They have said and told the Lebanese that you are not to come back. Remember I told you last week or 2 weeks ago, there's a river which I cannot pronounce. I can't even try to pronounce it. About 20 miles in from the Israeli border, the Israelis have said that they are doing the same thing as they did in Gaza. They're bombing every building in there and flattening the area, and have told the people who they drove out they are not allowed to return. So we will see what happens there. Our national information conduit, there is peace, there's not peace, the straits are open, the straits aren't open, the war is over, it's not over, we're getting the nuclear material back, we're not getting the nuclear material back. We are told every day that everything is over and everything we won and everything is ours, and every day it turns out not to be. The straits were declared to be open and now they're not open. The rationale being, we said the straits are open for transfer of ships, but we are blockading Iran's ports. Iran said if you're blockading our ports, then the straits are not open. So things are still up in the air. The price of oil goes up, the price of oil goes down. The most interesting thing is there are traders making millions of dollars who seem to have information before every announcement comes out of the White House. 15 minutes before, millions of dollars is bet on what's going to be said, and then it's said. My only question is, who participates in a poker game when you know the game is loaded? Why would you bet on the other side? Why would you bet? I don't understand this at all, so we may do some investigation into that. Natural disasters, I think we've been pretty lucky. There have been tornadoes all over the nation. I don't think any more than usual, and lots of property destroyed. But I haven't heard of very many deaths at all. Just 2 or 3, I think, is the limit, which hopefully the warnings are taking effect on that to help people. I have One of my renters who's not paying was on the eviction list, was in a traffic accident, broke her arm or her wrist or something, is going to need surgery. So now I'm going to delay the eviction, but I mean, that's really has nothing to do with it. She wasn't working before the accident, and she's not working after the accident, but it makes me feel bad about that. I have another one on the eviction list who is not paying their rent or repaying the money I loaned them for heating oil over the winter. I found them a place to go in a retirement home. They refused to go. So I guess what I'm telling myself is my conscience is clear. If I have to evict them onto the street, I had a place for them. If they refuse to go, there's not much else I can do. So if anybody has any contact, I've contacted Adult Protective Services, Children's Protective Services. They are totally overwhelmed. If they call back, they say they will do something, but nothing is done. I've called other retirement homes. The waiting list is approximately 2 years long. And I fill out the applications for these people and put them in because the waiting list is a kind of an illusion. Nobody is waiting 2 years to get in. People, when they call them, they've already found another place or they've moved to another state. So the list is not realistic, but that's what they will tell you. To find a place for disabled, elderly people who need a place to go, there is a huge, huge waiting list. There's a huge waiting list for places for people to live because the money they make does not equal the money they have to pay. Rents are going up astronomically. Not mine, but the houses I see comparable to what I have, they're asking $1,200, $1,300, $1,400 a month. It's incredible. It was like $700, $800 like 2-3 years ago. So it's difficult for everyone. Okay.
I have a concern.
Yes.
I have so many concerns, you don't have enough candles.
We got lots of candles.
But this week it's they doing away with the National Park Service. So they're going to destroy our environment. I'm just sick about it.
We are in alignment, the number of concerns, and if we started listing the concerns with the national government, the National Park Service, the lowering of the Medicaid distribution, the danger to local hospitals, I agree 100%. The National Park Service, they want to sell off public land. They want to start drilling in public land. They want to start mining in public land. We are facing basically an apocalypse in our basically democratic government. So we will light a candle for the National Park Service.
And enjoy that we went to the other side of the moon and what it's going to do for science
and enjoy
there's stuff there too.
a joy that they made it back safely.
Yes.
That's the other worries that I have with the money, and that's, I guess, another concern. Did you realize that NASA's budget is being cut massively for the future? NASA has all these plans to put a person on the moon and to go to Mars. Their budget is being cut significantly, like all the other budgets. And where is the money going? The new military appropriations bill, they're asking for $1.5 trillion. So, all right, we have our candles lit. Any more? All right, one last candle for those hopes and prayers, those thoughts, those fears, those trepidations that maybe you don't even realize. And also anyone who is listening, we do broadcast on Facebook, so don't say anything you don't want somebody else to hear. Somebody else is like 10 people that watch, so it's not a huge broadcast. So, all right, our children's story.
Real Christian majority community in the West Bank. And if you look behind me, this is the Church of St. George. It's a 5th century ruin, and it just goes to show how long all Christians have been here. For millennia, almost as long as Christianity has existed itself. But look here too. All of this has been burned by settlers, Israeli Jewish settlers who have come by and essentially staged a pogrom here. Repeatedly, community members here say on a daily basis. They also bring their animals to graze amongst these olive groves here, damaging the trees. All of it is done to try to get this Christian community, along with all of the Palestinian communities in the West Bank, to either leave the West Bank or leave Israel and the Palestinian territories entirely. The settlers believe that this is their land, and they'll do anything.
Okay, that's a pretty rough, and you know that I have trouble getting things from YouTube onto my PowerPoint. And that's a really rough approximation, but the reason I picked this one, no matter how rough it is that we've talked before about the settlers and the way they treat the Palestinians. What people don't realize is they are just as aggressive and just as harsh toward the Christian settlements. The Christian settlement he was talking about has been there for thousands of years in the Palestinian area, and they are being driven out as well. The Israeli settlers and many of the Israelis believe not only Israel, but there is a state called Greater Israel, which we've talked about, which includes the Sinai Peninsula, part of Egypt, part of Lebanon, part of Syria, part of all the surrounding states. They want to include in the Greater Israel. That is part of the definition of what Zionism is, and that's what we're going to talk about as we go along. This is a picture of one of the Israeli settlers harassing a Palestinian woman. If you look on the internet, there are thousands and thousands of these pictures, thousands of actual video tape of the Palestinian villages being burnt, their goats, their sheep being killed, the olive trees being destroyed, their houses being set on fire, their cars being set on fire. It is a tragedy that is what is happening. And the reason it is so tragic is because the Israelis, these are the people who this happened to them. And that's what we're going to talk about. I guess we'll get into the Lucifer effect. This is one of the other, to me, in a cartoon depiction, what the Nazis did in World War II is exactly what is happening in Palestine right now. It is pretty unbelievable. Okay, let's see. That's that one. Maybe this is the one. Oh, this is the one. I left my notes. There we go. I was too busy talking and I left everything down below. Israel and the change. What we're doing is comparing and contrasting Zionism with fascism. We're going to throw in the idea, the concept of critical thinking, and we're going to talk about the Lucifer effect and conspiracy theories. They all kind of blend together here. These are the topics that you'll see as we talk about as we go through. What we're trying to do is link the past to the present that we are experiencing right now. A quick definition: fascism is an ultranationalist, authoritarian political philosophy. It combines elements of nationalism, militarism, and economic self-sufficiency with just a hint of totalitarianism. Our experiences with fascism are primarily Germany and Italy prior to World War II and during World War II. The interesting thing about fascism, it is not there's no set definition. There are shades of nationalism, shades of economic self-sufficiency. The Germans said they were a national socialist government. Socialism means the people own the means of production. Communism is a form of socialism, extreme socialism. National socialism, as the Germans practiced it, was not socialism. There was private industry, and the government told private industry what to do and when to do it and where to do it. But private industry still owned it, so there is no hard and fast definition. Italy was completely different with their fascism, and interestingly enough, the idea of fascism started in Italy. Fascia, if you remember your Latin when you were in high school, that's the bundle of reeds with the axes or the hatchets on it, with the binding around it. That's called the fascia. That's where the name came from. Italy's Mussolini was the first one to start that. Zionism is pretty much the same description. Ultranationalist, authoritarian political philosophy that combines nationalism, militarism, and economic self-sufficiency, and with a hint of totalitarianism. Zionism basically, it started in the late 1800s. It came to fruition in the 1930s in Germany. It was a belief that the Jews have a moral and historic right and need for self-determination in Palestine. Palestine became the focus of the Zionist view. The original Zionists were thinking about a homeland in Africa or a homeland in South America, any place that there was land that was empty and free to be colonized was what they were looking at. But they eventually coalesced around Palestine naturally because Palestine was the homeland of the Jews. When they were expelled from Jerusalem by the Romans with a great diaspora, there's always been a strong pull in the Jewish community to return back to Palestine. The only problem was Palestine was occupied by the Arabs who had been there just as many years. This is where the elements of militarism and nationalism come in. The Jewish Zionists and the settlers, the current settlers today, do not believe the Palestinian Arabs have any right to be on Jewish land, even though they've been there for generations. I'm not sure what the rationale is. One you will hear documented, and I think I've shown you the video here before, the Palestinian or the Israeli settler woman who's the leader of their movement, saying that Jewish or Palestinian or Arab children have every right to kill Arab children because Arab children grow up to be Arab adults and Arab adults kill Jews. And the Torah tells them that if someone will hurt you in the future, you have the right to hurt them in the present before they get to the future. I haven't verified that. We will go in, I'll do some research on that in the future as we go along, but it is a pretty scary definition, a pretty horrifying understanding of your religion that says you have the right to kill children so they don't grow up. But she literally said that. Right, Palestine was based on the notion that Jews have a hereditary right to the land that outweighed the equivalent nationalist claims of the local Arabs. After suffering as a minority in Europe and the Middle East, establishing a Jewish state with a Jewish majority became the focus of the Zionist movement. Zionist organizations encouraged immigration to Palestine, and anti-Semitism produced a strong push. The anti-Semitism that was going on in all of Europe, primarily with Hitler in Europe, with the extermination of the Jews, was a tremendously strong push. Haganah, if you're familiar with the term Haganah and Irgun, are two militias, Zionist militias made up of Jews, and they were basically, there was no law that they followed to create a Jewish homeland. Irgun, with Menachem Begin, who was the prime minister of Israel in a later time, was responsible for bombing the King David Hotel, which was in Jerusalem, killing many, many British soldiers and British officers because the British were in charge of Palestine and the future state of Israel during World War II. And the Israeli settlers, the Zionists, wanted to push the British out, so they bombed the King David Hotel and killed British soldiers. So there is no morality that stands for either side in any of this. The Palestinians have created terrorist attacks, but so have the Israelis created terrorist attacks. And this is not something new, it's something that's been going on since World War II. Just a sidelight, part of Zionism was creating the Hebrew language. How many of you are aware that Hebrew was a language spoken in the early days of Israel thousands of years ago, but it had died out by the time we got to the modern, the 1900s, the 1800s. Hebrew was reconstituted as a language by the Zionists in the early 1900s. Israeli identity was reconstituted by the Zionists in the early 1900s. And I've got it here in somewhere, and I'll give you a little look ahead. Netanyahu, does anybody know what his real name is? It used to be Milikowski. Many of the Jews in Israel now, Ashkenazi Jews, which Ashkenazi means they are from Eastern Europe or Central Europe, Many from Poland, many from Russia, many from Hungary, many from Yugoslavia, immigrated to Israel and took Hebrew names. But they were not, that is not their original name. Many of the leaders of the Israeli government are Ashkenazi Jews, which are Jews from Eastern Europe. Amazing information that I was not aware of. All right, they're interested in transferring everything to Palestine and making Palestine a new state, and they're interested in pushing out the Arabs. The original plan of many of the Israeli settlers was the two-state solution. That was the hope that everybody was reaching toward, that the two states could live in harmony together. That has proved to be an illusion, partially because the Arabs were pretty intransigent in how they received the Israelis. But if you study the history of Palestine and Israel, the Jews that moved in were not exactly open to sharing with the Arabs either. So there was two opposing groups that made it difficult for either group to accept the other. In spite of that, there are still peace groups. There are still many groups of Jews and Arabs trying to work together to establish peace. I'll bring you a report or an audio recording I picked up somewhere, Facebook or something, of these two. They were on, I think, The Daily Show, if I can find it. They were interviewed on The Daily Show, an Arab, Palestinian, and a Jewish settler who have tried to form peace between the two. So it is not impossible, but the majority of Israeli citizens, they were doing man on the street interviews, and I don't know whether they just were unlucky in who they picked, but to an individual, women, men, children, even children, 13, 14, 15 years old, the statement was they have no right to be in Israel. They all need to leave. They all need to leave Gaza. They all need to leave the West Bank. That is Israeli territory, and no one else is allowed to live there. All right, Israel became the home of Zionism, and the drive to establish a Jewish state drew by the end justifies the means. We're seeing the fruits in Gaza and the West Bank today. The attitude that Arabs do not deserve to live in Greater Israel, and that Arab children will grow up to be Arab adults and will kill Jews, so they have the duty, not just the right, but the duty to kill the children now. That's why when you hear about no food being allowed into the Palestinian areas, and you say, how can they do this? How can they starve children? How can they prevent children from getting medical care? That is the rationale. If you wondered why they were doing that, there is a rationale. If you eliminate the children, and that was one of my statements before, to many people, and we've had discussions here, particularly with Ty, if you are a supporter of Israel, how can you support attacking and starving and denying medical care to the children? Most rational human beings don't have an answer for that. The answer that I'm finding, and the rationale that they are using, is those children will grow up to be adults, and they don't want them to grow up to be adults. They are cutting off the problem at the knees, so to speak. They are thinking ahead and planning for the future. Pretty scary. This is the embodiment of the Lucifer effect. The Lucifer effect, the name itself, the Lucifer effect, originates from the biblical story of Lucifer, an angel who was cast out of heaven to become Satan due to his pride and rebellion. The transformation of Lucifer from God's favorite angel to the embodiment of evil encapsulates the essence of the Lucifer effect. It encapsulates the frightening ability of circumstances to convert good individuals into agents of evil. The Lucifer effect means people who are good people in the beginning are transformed into evil people. How does that happen? There was a Stanford prison experiment, which was a case study, perhaps the most notable real-world example of the Lucifer effect. Was authored and run by Philip Zimbardo, who evidently is a famous researcher, in 1971. In this experiment, ordinary, psychologically healthy college students were randomly assigned to play either prisoners or guards in a simulated prison environment. Within just a few days, the students assigned as guards began to exhibit abusive and authoritarian behaviors, whereas those assigned as prisoners exhibited signs of severe stress and hopelessness. The experiment had to be cut short due to the disturbing levels of cruelty and dehumanization. This experiment has been repeated many, many times since to judge its validity. That is what we talk about with critical thinking. You don't accept something on face value. You look at it from all different sides. You try to understand the motivation behind the people involved and the motivation behind the actual activity itself. These students were divided just by 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. All the ones became guards. All the twos became prisoners. They were put into a closed environment, and without any organization or any stimulation from the people running the experiment, the guards who have total authority over the prisoners began to exhibit more and more controlling activity, more and more inhuman activity. Everybody who looks at the prison systems can see this is what happens. This is what happens in police departments if they don't have civilian control. When you see pictures of the police beating suspects, pounding them, kicking them, insulting them, that is not because they are trained to do that. It is because when you are given a position of power and no regulation, no control, no training to counteract that, the natural tendency is to take that power and use it, and to find it glorifies you and makes you feel better. We all have seen examples of this, even in a power situation at work. If you have a boss who is authoritarian, the more power they are given, the more power they exert over their employees. And you can see the result in the employees. You can see the result in those who are prisoners. They become cowed. They become yes people. They do what they're told. They don't react. They try to stay out of trouble. They try to keep as low profile as possible. They begin to lose hope. They begin to lose a sense of identity about who they are and how important their lives are. That goes against the whole principle of a reformatory, was the reforming of the behavior of the people who were brought into that. It is really hard to do because when you're in a position of authority, you tend to dictate rather than teach. And we are basically sadly returning to that. When I was a school teacher, and this was like 50 years ago, they still allowed paddling, and that created a sense of authority and control in teachers, and a sense of helplessness and hopelessness in students. And some reacted in a basically the opposite direction. They acted out because they were not going to accept the authority figures that were bringing to them. And you can see this in the activities today on the streets. Okay. The Holocaust serves as a stark warning of the consequences of hatred, prejudice, and unchecked power. It underscores the need for vigilance against anti-Semitism and all forms of discrimination. It ensures the lessons of history guide present and future generations. Survivor stories continue to educate and remind the world of the human cost of intolerance and genocide. The Holocaust was lived through by the Germans, by the German Jews, and by the Polish Jews. And the Holocaust included not just Jews, but there were the problems with the German treatment of prisoners, of people who were subject to their authority, began with people who were mentally handicapped. They thought those people were a burden on society. They cost too much. They would never get well. So they started authorizing euthanasia for the mentally handicapped or the physically handicapped that were unable to participate in society. That is where the whole killing doctrine began in Germany, and it was extended and expanded to include that's the portions of the population that they didn't think deserved to live or they wanted to eliminate. It is a sickness like a cancer that grows in the body politic. We'll do a little bit on the history of the Judaism. The Ashkenazi are the Eastern European Jews. Many of these current leaders have changed their names. As I said, Netanyahu used to be Melikowski. There are different kinds of Jews that, as far as the culture goes. You have the cultures of the East, which is how the Jews of the Middle East were categorized. The European Jewish establishment were the Ashkenazi. They are the upper echelon, the people who had the education, the money, and became the leaders of the new Israel, because Israel was basically founded from Europe. It is not an indigenous country that came from the Middle East. The Romans expelled all the Jews and tore down the temple. There's even a question I've seen, everything is being questioned now, and maybe that's not so bad, that the Wailing Wall is supposed to be the last remaining wall of the temple. There is questioning now whether the Wailing Wall the temple was totally destroyed, and the Wailing Wall is part of a Roman fortress that is being designated as the last wall of the temple. So the one thing about the popularity of YouTube, and anybody can put their opinions out anywhere, is you're getting unbelievably interesting opinions, and whether they're factually true or not, that's where critical thinking comes in. You have to look at each question. Sometimes, I'm kind of getting ahead of myself here, but sometimes you have to look at a question when people make claims. If they make 5 claims, you have to look at all 5. If the first 4 make sense and seem like they could be plausible, then you might give some credence to the 5th. If they're making claims like the gentleman who says he teleports himself to the Golden Corral in Georgia, the member of the Trump administration, then you might want to question his further claims that he makes. You might want to question the decisions he makes as far as the way the government should spend money. And that's the way critical thinking works. You take everything in totality and you measure it together, and you weigh each item individually, and then you add them all up to see what you end up with. So the other thing you have is the Eastern Jews, which are Mizrahi. I can't pronounce some of these, but they are Jews from Morocco, Tunisia, Algeria, Libya, Egypt. They're Sephardim, if you've heard the Sephardic Jews. They are the Jews that were expelled from Spain. That is another cultural group. The Sephardic Jews live in the Iberian Peninsula, Spain and Portugal, and they were expelled and came to many of these other Arab lands. They went across to Tunisia, many Arab countries, and they came also into Israel. There is a tremendous cultural divide in Israel between you're looked down upon if you are a Middle Eastern Jew, or if you are a Spanish Jew. The Ashkenazi are considered the pinnacle of the Jewish cultural pyramid, and they hold most of the positions of power in Israel. Majority of the Sephardim left for the Ottoman Empire, including Bulgaria and Yugoslavia, settled throughout the Middle East. Many settled in Amsterdam. Many others returned to Spain after they were allowed to. Zionism rendered these long-standing relationships largely irrelevant, as power passed from the hands of the European colonizers to those of the European Jewish Zionists. Zionists and Nazism are fundamentally opposing ideologies, with Zionism aiming for Jewish self-determination and the Nazis seeking Jewish extermination. However, in the 1930s, they had a tactical, temporary, and highly controversial interaction, normally through the Havara. Havara is the transfer agreement. In the 1930s, the Jewish Zionists created an agreement with the Nazis to transfer thousands of Jews, roughly 60,000, from Germany to Palestine through the transfer of assets. They gave their assets to the government, basically bribed their way out, and then the German government sold the Jewish Palestinians, the German Palestinian Jews, enough supplies and gave them basically founding to create a government, to create a state in Palestine. It was viewed by many as breaking the international boycott of Nazi Germany. So, do you understand what I'm saying? The Jews in Germany bought their way out for many of the Jews to Palestine by giving the Nazis the money, their land, their property, everything they owned, with the agreement that the Nazis would return a portion of this, which they called fees and taxes, etc., when they emigrated to Palestine. So the Nazis were eliminating Jews from the country and getting all their money. The Jews were getting out of the country and getting some money back to found their new country in Israel. The strange thing about this is the overlapping interests. The Nazis, which wanted Germany free of Jews, and the Zionists, who wanted to build a Jewish homeland, had a temporary shared interest in Jewish immigration. The sad thing is, and there have been reports, and you have to apply critical thinking, I don't know if it's true, that they took the Jews they didn't want and told the Nazis to keep those Jews. They wanted the Ashkenazi, the leaders, the bankers, the real estate people, the industrialists, the people who had money that could buy their way out. Those Jews were transferred to Palestine. The Jews that didn't have money, the Jews from Poland, the Jews from Russia, the Jews that were peasants, those Jews were left behind intentionally, is what some people say. They were traded to the Nazis. You take these and we'll take these. The end justifies the means. Is that true? We all know examples of people who have traded things that are valuable to them for something that is more valuable to them. It is not outside the realm of human possibility. It does happen, and I am 90% certain that this has probably happened in some instances. All right, Jews and Nazis worked together. They encouraged the Nazis, and partially one of the other things they will say is they did not stop the Nazis, but did not discourage the Nazis from mistreating the Jews, because it encouraged the Jews to leave Germany and go to Palestine. These Jews that wanted to start the new nation, the Zionists, wanted the Jews to leave Germany. What's a good way to have them leave? Kristallnacht, when all of the Jewish businesses were attacked, when Jews were attacked on the street. That would encourage you to leave Germany. The Zionists were basically supporting the Nazis in that. This is the supposition, the claim is made. Things get really weird when you get to conspiracy theories. Eichmann, as you know, was tortured and killed thousands of Jews at the concentration camps. He was captured by the Jews and taken to Israel and executed. One of these stories, the conspiracy theories going around, is the reason Eichmann was executed and captured by the Jews is he was ready to publish public information about how the Jews, the Zionists, and the Nazis collaborated during World War II, and to stop him from opening his mouth and telling what they did not want him to tell, he was captured and executed. You'll have to work that one around and see if you can find corroborating information. Some of these people, and we know those ideas, the person who said that is also a person who said, and this was a website that I had found, the person who said that there were only 800,000 Jews killed in the Holocaust, not 6 million. And he also said those were not gas chambers, they were delousing places where when the Jews were brought in, they were full of lice, and so they were given a fumigation, but they were not killed. So if you take those 2 points, plus the point that he said Eichmann was going to reveal the information, that subtracts the believability from the Eichmann story, because we do know that 6 million Jews, well, 6 million were killed, Jews and gypsies and handicapped people. And we do know that the gas chambers were, in fact, gas chambers. So that is where critical thinking becomes important. The Hungarian Jewish Zionist trade lives with the Nazis. To save the Nazis, there's a guy named Krasner. And he was assassinated. Well, actually, died in a boat accident. He's the one that reported all this to this person who reported it. He was basically fell off his yacht and died, kind of like all the Russians falling out of high-story windows. And the journalist who reported all this information also died of a mysterious heart attack. So some of these conspiracy theories have tendrils of things that makes you wonder. So the main thing I'm drawing together between Zionism and fascism and Nazism is fanaticism, the inability to see other people as human. The Zionists lost their view of Arabs as people, and they worried about losing the right to existence, and they became sworn enemies deserving of death. When you lose the ability to see your opponent, the other person, as a human being, that is a trademark of Zionism, of fascism, of ultranational conservatism. That is the danger that we face today, that our opponents are dehumanized, and that is something that we have to guard against with every fiber of our being. There is nobody who does not deserve to live. It is DEI to the fullest. Everybody deserves an equal opportunity. Okay, running along again. Comments, questions? Anything you want to know more about or less about? Anything you got too much of information today? All right, these are never-ending topics. The exploration into the human condition and why do we do the things we do. All right, time for our offering. We're going to hear Mighty Fortress is Our God. Closing hymn is 166, Years Are Coming. when forever's war's dread banner shall be furled, and the angel peace be welcomed, regent of a happy world, hail with song that glorious era, when the sword shall gather rust, and the helmet rest, and thou shalt sleep at last in silent dust. If only we live long enough to see that. All right, extinguishing the chalice, my friends. When you go from here, know that our hearts are always in a holy place, for we are always connected to one another. Know that deep down our hearts beat in one universal rhythm. May we each find the sacred space to hear it. And may each of us maintain that view of every other human being as a human being. All right, postlude, till we meet again. Till we meet again. The picture here is Tracherners, which is a special breed of German horse from the town of Trachern. I think I'm pronouncing that right, which is in Prussia or was in Eastern Germany. Hitler, like everything else, wanted this German dog, the German Shepherd. He also wanted the German horse, the Trachern. So they were bred specifically for nobleness, all the typical Aryan examples. This is what actually happened during the war. The noble Arabian-style steed with all the fancy legwork and action didn't do very well pulling military wagons through the mud. So they ended up with the Slavic ponies from Eastern Europe. Is what the German army used as actual workhorses. Reality meets the vision of glory and justice. We see that every day in our national appearance with our giant ballroom, with our national arch or arc. Reality is going to have to meet spirituality sometime along here. All right, as is usual, we leave our one candle lit, particularly for the National Park Service and the National Forest Service. We went through the Park Service thing before now. If you have your old adult National Park Pass for the year, it has somebody's picture on it you may not want to have on your Park Pass. If you put a happy face over that picture, they will not allow you into the national park. That is what is called totalitarianism. All right, those absent friends, if there's anything we can do for anybody, please let us know. Donuts and coffee as usual, and hope to see you next week. If you have any comments, questions, whatever, we're on Facebook. Send us a comment. All right.
Well, I did too, and I